What's up, gifted family? Welcome to another episode of the show that is the GP YouTube. Just a reminder that if you support what we do here, make sure to go over to giftedperformance.com and sign up for our automated coaching service. For only $1 a day, you'll get access to 15 highly customized training programs, a macronutrient calculator, our meal planning feature that lets you build and save meals based on your macros, as well as access to our private Facebook group. All subscriptions help us in continuing to put out great content to get you to your fitness goals. Thanks for stopping by, and without any further delay, let's get into today's video. Enjoy.
Welcome back, guys. Another Q&A episode of the GPP, the Gifted Performance Podcast, where we give you the information and practical takeaways to improve your own general physical preparedness. I am joined by three of my closest friends. Dom, we are showing that we are toddlers. Dom's got the Zelda shirt on. What was the best Zelda? The Ocarina of Time. I was going to say, I couldn't even see the bottom of the shirt. I couldn't see the bottom of the shirt, and I knew. I'm repping a little bit of my dog, a little bit of my childhood favorite show. And then we've got Paul, who's got the, I don't even know what that is, like a bumblebee tank top. I like it. It looks comfy.
It is comfy.
And Jay, just looking classy as ever, with the Batman in the background. There it is. All right, folks. So we are going to start this thing off today with something that has been weighing heavy on me, and it's something that I don't often do. So get your cameras out, record this, because I'm going to say something that I haven't said since Vietnam. Guys, I was wrong. And I've been wrong for years now. So last night I was scrolling through the body recomposition group, Lyle McDonald's group, friend of the channel, Lyle. Thanks for having such quality group, quality folks in there. And they posted, someone in there, I forget who exactly it was, posted it. They posted a research article titled, oh man, I got to pull up the title here. The title of the article was The Effect of Shell Egg Pasteurization on the Protein Quality of Albumin. And it was a 2001 study that looked at the bioavailability of liquid egg whites, so like your carton of egg whites that you get this pasteurized. So I always assumed the pasteurization process, raising the temperature up to 160 degrees, was enough to increase the bioavailability of the eggs found inside. But guys, boy oh boy, was I wrong. Raise your hand if you've ever drank liquid egg whites before. Many, many times.
I have, but
never
it was.
Really?
I'm not
I've never drank liquid egg whites.
Oh man, during some of my most successful preps, I would work security at the bar. I'd come home, take about a half a carton, dump it in a glass, mix in some sugar-free chocolate syrup, and I would have chocolate egg whites.
That just sounds fucking disgusting to me.
So many activities that bodybuilders do are disgusting, and that's the one where you're like, no, I draw the line. Like drinking liquid egg whites, that's where I draw the line.
I had a buddy who thought that milk was evil and just awful for you, and so when he had Oreos, he would drink fucking liquid egg whites, or when he ate cereal, he would use liquid egg whites for it.
Man, I
think maybe a little bit of creamer, a little bit of flavored creamer.
I'm going to get blasted on this podcast. That's okay. You can tell me how much of a piece of shit I am in the comments below. When I was a kid, I hated milk, like genuinely hated milk. So I would dip my Oreos in. Are you ready? It's water. Water.
What?
I'm sorry, guys. Please.
Of all the things.
I wouldn't drink the water afterward. It wasn't, I wouldn't drink
I feel like I get it.
Water.
When people are like, I don't like milk, I'm like, that's cool, man. Fuck you, but that's cool. But like, milk and Oreos, that's like different. You know? That's just a different thing. That's not.
But if you like the taste of Oreos and you don't like the taste of milk, you wouldn't want the milk ruining the Oreo for you.
But
So
it
what
doesn't.
made you do
You don't
it with
take all it does is make it softer.
Listen, I wanted the sensation of the softness, but I wasn't ready to commit to the milk.
And also,
I was
it's
just
just a
very early
different
on. I was a
thing.
vegan.
Like
in
slamming a cold glass of
worried about
milk
that.
when like you just have like Oreo paste, like so much Oreo paste, like half swallowed Oreo paste stuck in your mouth that you're like, I need something refreshing and cold. It's just different, man. It hits you different.
Ice water. All you need is a nice glass of ice
You're a
water.
piece of shit. Fuck you. I don't know. We gotta talk about this.
Yeah, before we move on, let's remember. Do you guys remember when everyone was super mad at Fairlife because those videos came out of them like beating cows and stuff? Like, that was so fucked up. But what's even more fucked up is that people were upset for like literally 72 hours, and then they were like, "Yo, Fairlife, high protein milk, let's get it."
See, yeah, that's the thing. That's why I never really drank egg whites, because I would just slam 2 glasses of Fairlife milk with 2 scoops of protein and be like, I got
Fairlife
75 grams of protein.
I honestly think Fairlife tastes different. Tastes better. Than
Tastes
regular
cleaner.
milk. Cleaner.
It tastes like the fear and adrenaline of those cows. You can taste it in your milk.
The 4 vegans that watch this, sorry Miranda, have just left the chat.
It tastes cleaner because it tastes like oppression. Maybe that's why I'm always like, ooh, this tastes delicious. Yeah.
All right, so aside from liquid egg whites and milk, we also wanted to start off, I threw it on my story, and maybe you guys did the same and you got some other responses that we can add there. And it was all of the ways that waist trainers, so for those who aren't familiar, a waist trainer is something very tight, similar to a corset that you strap around your waist under the illusion that it's going to make your waist smaller over time if you wear it. I honestly don't even know the protocols. All day, most of the day, hours out of the day, depends who you talk to. So all the way waist trainers work, debunked. So the one that I got that was the most popular, I think I had 6 people submit this as their answer. They said that waist trainers work because fit pros with small waists wear them. So because these people that have small waists wear them, they must give you a small waist. Does anyone want to dive in and debunk that one before I take my shot at it?
Did anybody ever think that maybe those fit pros already had small waists?
Chicken and the egg.
That never occurred to anyone.
Yeah.
That was going to be my argument. It's like maybe these waist trainer companies were like, our shit doesn't work. So you know who we need to find as an ambassador? Someone who already has a small waist. Strap that bitch on. Look at it work. It's magic.
Yeah, so, oh man, I think corsets, it comes from that whole thing, and corsets might have an effect, but I think there's like a wrong assumption that even corsets are just like a permanent thing. And I'm pretty sure like, because we've seen the example of corsets and where they even do like x-rays and shit, and like things move, and potentially like your core shape changes. But if you were to stop wearing that corset for a while, I'm pretty sure everything just falls back to where it should. But waist trainers are just completely fucking different. And the difference with the corset too, like for people that, wear them, like I guess like back in the day wore them, like they wore them for, like if you're really trying to shrink your waist, like it's something that has to be worn all the fucking time, versus like you got to sleep in it. You got to wear it when you're during your waking hours. And the waist trainers, one, they are not as, like extreme, like corsets have wire in them, and you can get them extremely tight. Whereas a waist trainer, it's like a floppy piece of material that compresses somewhat. I guess almost like I mean, they're a little more sturdy, but I guess in the way that you, like an elbow sleeve or something like that, and people are mostly wearing them during their training sessions only, or parts of the day. So you're not really going to get a long lasting or probably even much of an effect from that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that wear like corset type waist trainers too, where they have like hooks and they hook on, and then they wear them like, I mean, I know a girl actually, she wore one for so long and constantly had vasoburn on her midsection, and then wore the corset all day for like 6 or 7 months. It caused permanent nerve damage in her midsection. She can't even feel it, and her skin elasticity is like, you know, when you like stretch out a rubber band for so long and then it just like stays like that. That's kind of where she's at now. And it's been like years like that, and it's like slowly getting better. But I don't know if that was a combination of the two, but I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Just rubbing a non-FDA approved cream that burns the fuck out of you every day for months on end probably did do something.
Well, that's weird, because isn't it like when you test because I mean, when I was in the fire academy in a past life, that's how you would test if somebody was dehydrated. You call it turgor, where you like pull the skin on their finger to see if it goes back. So is that affecting hydration in that specific area? That's weird.
I don't know.
Possibly. Yeah. I wonder if they've ever looked. So the next one that I got was, and I think that this one was someone being facetious, but they said they squeeze my organs into a compact area. And that's true. That is the truth of what things are happening here. I guess my counterpoint is to what happens to your organs when you take it off. They return to their normal location. That's number one. Number two, why are you trying to do that to your organs? I wonder if there's been any research on corsets that's looked at potential like organ damage.
I don't think there is, but I know that's been the common like theoretical rationale against them, because I mean a lot of your organs too, like, you know, they secrete different things like proteins, hormones, and shit like that, and like they, you know, theoretically they may not function properly if they're shifted or tightly compressed. So
hear me out on this one.
But like I said, a waist trainer, like that's like putting a tight sock around your waist. Like that's not the same as a corset. Like
yeah, the commercial ones now are like essentially like neoprene. It's like wearing a very tight wetsuit around your waist pretty much at all times.
Yeah.
Like
it's like a sweatband.
I think it's a little more sturdy than neoprene, but basically the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, so Jimmy just threw another one. She said the point is to increase sweating in your core area, so to locally dehydrate your core area. That's one that I hadn't heard. But like you look at those companies like Sweet Sweat. Is that what it's called? Sweet Sweat?
Yes.
Gross.
Hey, sweet.
Like, oh, that's disgusting. You might want to get checked for diabetes. Or the vasoburn is that you get localized sweating. And I think that comes from like people thinking that burning fat is like a literal thing. Like hot equals burning fat. More hot equals more burning fat.
So I think the argument is if you can increase the temperature of the area, you can promote more blood flow.
That's
and if
true.
you have like fat oxidation going on in that area, you can use it a bit more. I don't know how much that translates to actually burning fat, but that's like the whole idea is increase temperature here so we can put blood here so we can take fat away from here.
Ah.
It sounds really good.
That's why like vasoburn has capsaicin in it to give it that burning sensation. So it heats up the whole area and promotes more blood flow to the area.
But
That's
the blood
kind of
flow that it's promoting is superficial. It's not going to reach those deep areas. That red skin, when you take it off, means that all the blood flow has gone to the skin, not to the adipose in the area.
That's why they target subcutaneous fat.
I know the thing.
Marketing, bro.
That's brilliant.
I know the thing with vasoburn that I'd like more, one day to talk to somebody that could maybe help me out with this one, but it contains yohimbine, and like the concept behind that is you have this transdermal, but the problem with that people don't realize is, you put something on transdermally, but it goes systemic once it's in your body,
Also, what's the absorption rate of a transdermal yohimbine versus just ingesting yohimbine orally?
I think it matters on the carrier system that is actually carrying yohimbine transdermally. Because, like, I worked with Kalo's body for a while, and they made creams too, and lotions, and his carrier system he used, they did a clinical trial on it, and it was a lot more effective than, like, the leading brand. So I think it depends on how good that carrier system is to get it across the skin barrier and deep enough so where it could get absorbed.
Also, I could be mistaken, but I want to say a while back, I looked into the the oral bioavailability of yohimbine, and I think it's extremely variable between people, and it could be something really low for some people, like 30%, and then like for other people, I think all the way up to 80%. So for yohimbine, I don't think oral for some people is the best route of administration.
I think I need to email Kamal Patel, MrExamine.com, so we can ask him some deep questions here. But hear me out on this one. Chinese foot binding. How does that work?
What is that?
They just tie up feet when they're little kids and don't let them grow. And they
that's the important part. So I've had someone say waist training is the same as Chinese foot binding. But again, like Paul said, one, you have to start when you're very young, and two, it's affecting the bones of the feet, right? Like it's preventing the bones from growing, correct?
It's the same idea as a bonsai kitten.
Paul, you're Korean. You should know about Chinese foot binding.
So that's racist. He's Korean, not Chinese.
Fucking that would just be weird too. Like if you like tied up a kid's waist, they probably grow up looking really fucking weird. Like perfect cylinder like waist, and then just like.
I've got a kid.
Look like a body.
I mean, we can try this out.
Clinical trial.
You get to try one thing though, dude. Do you want to use it on this?
I found a clinical experience of corsets and organ damage.
Ah.
It's just one person, though. No underlying liver pathology, wore the constricting garment, and then had subcapsulary hematomas and other internal organ pathologies that happened from compression, bruising, and ischemia of the newly found popularity of corsets.
Huh.
Well, we'll have to link that in the description, in the show notes. Learn you something.
My girlfriend tried it during her prep, and, finally, after like years, I was like, you know what? Fuck it, man. I've been wrong before. Give it a shot. But what she did was she wore a corset at night while she was sleeping, and then all day long through the day wore a waist trainer. And after, I can't remember the duration of time, but after a little bit of time, visually, I thought it seemed like her waist got smaller, but she was also dieting at the time. Like, I could have just been seeing her progression dieting and thinking it was the corset. But also, after, I can't remember, handful of weeks or maybe a month or two, she was just kind of like, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore. And she just stopped. And from that point on, the rest of her diet, I was like, your waist looks just like it did last diet. Like, so.
Yeah, I think that's the most frequent time that people wear waist trainers, right, is when they're dieting and they're like, hey, look, my waist is getting smaller. It's like,
but they're losing weight.
You're dieting.
Your waist is getting smaller already.
You asshole. All right, what are some of the other ones here?
I've heard that one a bunch. They reduce hypertrophy of core muscle.
Yeah, so that's an argument there, is that by wearing these very constrictive garments, especially while you're training, it reduces the demand of your core musculature either throughout the day or while you're training, to the point where you can either get atrophy or a reduction in hypertrophy of your core musculature. And I would say that that's probably true.
But to what extent?
To what extent? What's the absolute like change in like hypertrophy there? Like, I mean, what is it? An eighth of an inch? Is it a quarter of an inch? How are we going to measure this?
I bet it has to do with like some like bracing issues. Like if it's super tight, like a belt, like if you could brace against it, maybe I could see it. Like, but you don't have to use your abs as much, where it's helping you.
In a lot of divisions, like even in like something like bikini, where like they probably wear waist trainers the most. That's the division where they probably wear waist trainers the most, would be something like bikini. Like, you still want defined and decently developed ab and core oblique musculature. So would atrophy of the muscles in those areas actually benefit you, just to get, an extra quarter inch off your waist?
I mean, usually when we see somebody with poor, like, ab structure and weak cores, like, on stage, like, it's not a good look. To just be really lean and have a smooth stomach, it's not a good look.
And that was always my issues in my front poses. I could get really lean. I could get, like, striated glutes from top to bottom lean, and I would hit my front poses, and you couldn't see a single ab, just because I had such small ab muscle bellies, I guess you could say.
They weren't voluptuous.
Because of my goddamn waist trainer wearing. No, it's that damn Inzer belt, like 4-inch thick piece of plywood I wore around my waist while I did my 12 sets of 10 on squat.
Those are the days.
The lack of weighted ab work, maybe.
That's what it was. Yeah. But I have to say, anecdotally, since switching over to CrossFit, doing a lot of GHD sit-ups, a lot of toe to bar, a lot of direct ab work, I feel as if even at a higher body fat, I'm probably like 12% body fat right now, I can still see my abs protruding quite a bit through. So maybe I'm getting ab jacked.
Yeah, man.
Time to throw the waist trainer back on.
Yeah, I don't know about the hypertrophy thing, like, because they're not so, I don't even know what words to use, like abrasive, or I don't know. You're still using your core. Like, I can see it be a problem if like you're like, oh, I'm wearing this waist trainer that's so supportive that I'm not going to use my core at all to keep myself up, and I wear it all day long. But even in training, like, you're bending over to pick up dumbbells, and like you're, laying up and getting down.
You know what I imagine? Have you guys seen the episode of Family Guy where Stewie wears the back brace because it gets him a lot of attention? And then he finally takes it off, and all the muscles in his back are so weak that he like can't even stand up or walk. Like, that's what I imagine people think that happens when you like take the waist trainer off. Like, I imagine you're still bracing. You're still using your core underneath it quite a bit.
Because you're even bracing against it.
Out into it. Yeah.
Maybe. So it doesn't... I don't know.
Maybe.
I remember back in the day, like everybody wore, and people still do it, where they wear a belt because they don't want their waist to get wide. And I don't think that's ever really materialized, any of that waist.
Dude, how about Saran wrap? People wear Saran wrap.
Oh, damn, I completely forgot about that.
They lather up like Vaseline and put Saran wrap on them.
Pull the water out. Pull it out.
Let's pull water out 8 weeks out. Let's do it.
Start pulling water. It's never too early. My favorite last final words of a bodybuilder during peak week: just wait till I pull water. Like, oh, you're right. I can't wait. I'm so.
And you're just like, you've been fucking up, man. I've been pulling water since 11 weeks out, dude.
All right, what are some other ones here?
Oh, dude, you brought up something cool or notable the other week off air when you were talking about, like, how much can ab work even thicken your waist?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, go ahead.
Look at, the muscle bellies, like the size. If we look at like the diameter of these muscles of your abs, I mean, they're what? an eighth of an inch, a quarter of an inch, maybe. Rectus abdominis is like probably, or obliques are probably the thickest of the muscles there. And they're what, half an inch, quarter of an inch, maybe thick. So if you, let's just say that the waist trainer works so well that your obliques go down like half in size. It's like, okay, you've just taken what, a quarter inch off your waist for what could be a noticeable difference in terms of losing that definition in that area. It's just I don't know. It
doesn't make sense. Like,
it doesn't.
Like which ratio wise is actually a lot more, but imagine adding a quarter inch to your arms, or at times where you did add a quarter inch to your arms. And you look at your arms, do they look any bigger? No different.
No different. There's 2 years of work, 2 years of direct arm work for that quarter inch, and they look no different. Not the only ones that notice are your homies. So always kiss your homies for noticing. What are some other ones that they had on here? Prevent bloating.
Like, bloating has nothing to do with your digestive system.
Like, hey man, just eat that food that doesn't agree with you. You're lactose intolerant. That's fine. Slam some ice cream, throw on the waist trainer, and just speed the expulsion process along. You'll just be blowing it out before you have any discomfort.
Hey, you won't be bloated.
You don't let it go here, man.
It's true.
Just force it to go into other places in your body.
It's like you see the people post like after a big cheat meal, like praying that all this pizza goes to my delts. Like I imagine them doing that, Paul, like strapping on the waist trainer so that like they literally can't poop out the pizza, so that it just stays up and goes into their delts.
They just have one of those things that you spackle walls with, and you're like rolling it into their delt.
Here we go. The last one that I got. So remember, guys, the question was explain to me the ways that waist trainers work. The final submission that I got was good friend Omar Rivera submitted another one, and he submitted, why would you use tempo work if the goal is hypertrophy?
What does that have to do with waist trainers?
That's a great question. That's what I thought. So can we turn this into a question?
Oh, he gave me that question too, and I put it at the bottom. I didn't know he gave it to you and included it under waist trainers.
Omar, what the fuck, man? We were talking about waist trainers. We'll get to your tempo question on the next one. This is your punishment for asking a question where it didn't belong. We're not going to answer it until the next episode. So come back and we'll see you on the next one. All right, that's 27 minutes about waist trainers and egg whites. Guys, I'm really proud of us. We really know how to.
That was good. That was good.
Say a lot and accomplish nothing.
We're never getting that time back. It's gone.
Nope. That's committed. That's sweat equity right there, guys. Sweet sweat equity, you could say. All right, so the first question of the day, user submitted, it comes from @dad_lifts_. Dom, I think this is a friend of yours.
Client now.
Client of yours now. Is he a dad?
Yeah.
And he lifts?
Yep.
Perfect. I like the name then. It fits. So Mr. Dad Lifts says, any specific benefits to carbing up before your workout for more instant energy, as opposed to just balancing them throughout the day and not doing more before your workout and less after? All right, so the question here being, are there any specific benefits to having a large bolus of carbohydrates directly before your training? What do you think, like, what do you think Mr. Dad Lifts' definition of like right before your training is? Are we talking 30 minutes before, 60 minutes before, somewhere in that window maybe?
Right before sounds like within an hour, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say within an hour.
All right, cool. Then we'll answer this question with that being our premise. Carbohydrates within an hour of the workout, what would be some of the benefits? Or are you better off spreading throughout the day, or maybe even having those carbohydrates after your training session? Take it away, gentlemen.
I think we should
define what the workout is first.
All right, so how does this individual train?
It's chest
just
day.
normal weight training.
Normal resistance training. 60 to 90 minutes, somewhere between 12 to 20 sets per workout, a couple body parts per workout. Yeah?
There you go. Now Paul can take it away.
Paul, hit it.
I mean, I don't have to start. I don't mind starting, but fuck it. All right. So, I think, it really depends, well, I think the first thing we need to consider is that it takes time for shit you eat to be digested and then to be turned into other things like muscle glycogen. For that to be incorporated into muscle as muscle glycogen, that can take some time. So it would make sense that you would want to have. It probably doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things for somebody who sits on their ass all day and literally probably 20 hours a day. And they train and move for a total of 2 hours of their whole fucking day. Probably matters there. But it would make sense that you would want to have, some carbohydrates throughout your day to make sure that process has been happening and that you're fully replenishing your glycogen and not just trying to just shove it all in immediately pre-workout. But I do think it makes sense that you would also want to have some carb pre-workout. And even a small amount of carb intra-workout isn't necessarily a bad thing, just to keep your blood sugar from dropping and stuff, and from that aspect. But yeah, I don't think I would just say, unless somebody is calorie restricted and they really need to pick and choose where their food goes and be a little more specific about having more food around their most active periods of the day, that probably just split it all up fairly equally throughout your day.
Yeah, I think if you're a pre-contest bodybuilder that's pretty deep in prep, it may make a difference, to give you enough energy. Because at that point you're literally holding on for dear life. So it may help you perform better in your session. Maybe some people don't really have that issue where they're I don't need that food beforehand. I always think of a lot of these questions from sort of the evolutionary biologist standpoint, sort of how poor of a species would we be if we had to eat right before we did something all the time? For a species that's really pretty bad at running fast and hunting things. We don't have claws. We don't have any of those things. So that'd be a pretty bad sort of adaptation if we needed to eat and then immediately do something. So I think if you kind of look at it from that standpoint, it just doesn't seem to really not necessary in most aspects unless you're literally starving yourself for a competition.
Yeah, I could see that. I think though too that from the perspective of optimization, that word that we all is trendy to hate now.
I'm just gonna kick the shit out of you.
But
How dare you? How dare you?
There's certain things and part of it's just comfort. I myself do not train well just being hungry. Knowing I'm hungry in the gym and feeling that hunger, I'm not going to train as well. And it's, similar to I hate hot environments. I mean, we know physiologically there's a reason why hot environments are bad for training, but also if I'm just hot in the gym, I'm going to be dude, fuck this. I can't train in this. It sucks. So.
Paul, you'd make a great CrossFitter.
I know.
I'll show up day one. No AC? All right, guys. I'm fucking done with this stupid sport.
CrossFit's stupid. You guys don't have ACs?
I know. I'm going to go do it in an hour, and I agree with you. No, I think that Paul makes a good point of you really have to consider a lot of factors. And you also have to consider what's the composition of the meal that you're eating? Because if you're eating a meal that's hot, a typical kind of bodybuilder meal, a mixed meal is going to have some sort of protein, some sort of fat in it as well. And the content of, amount of fiber, amount of fat, the nutrients that slow down digestion could mean that meal that you had 1 hour pre-workout is still digesting. The majority of it is still digesting by the time you get to the gym. You start working out, blood flow is shunted away from the digestive system to the skeletal muscle, whatever muscle you're working that day. And basically none of that meal is now getting digested. It's basically just sitting in your stomach, waiting for blood flow to move back to the digestive system to kind of start that digestive process again. So you may have to wait, 2, 3, 4, up to 6 hours before those like wheat thins that you had with lunch have been turned into and stored as muscle glycogen. Now, actually, what Jay says about having some carbohydrates when you're very lean, and I think this comes from the Rapid Fat Loss Handbook as well. There's talk in there about having some carbohydrate, like 5 to 10 grams of simple carbohydrate directly before you train, or like right when you start training, just as a way of stabilizing blood glucose, having some sort of way of stabilizing blood glucose. So the first set of bench press or the first set of deadlift doesn't just completely sap you of all your blood glucose and you go hypo and you just feel like you're going to die.
Yeah. I think like my smallest meal of the day, I think, is my pre-workout meal. I don't really eat much before I go train. I have like maybe 30 grams of carbs and like a little bit of fat, and I go train.
I go hard. I eat my meal and I'm like, all right, change, like make my beverage, and I go fucking train. I do not like being like hungry at the gym.
No, I do that. Like, I think like in prep, psychologically, it might help somebody to get through their workout. Like, oh, I just ate some carbs before my workout. They might like mentally feel like they have like more energy that day, just because they had those carbs before. But like, I used to do a lot of like meal timing, like pre-workout, post-workout meals for people. And then I kind of just shied away from it because like the more and more I just learned like nutrient timing is like the tip of the pyramid, like of importance. So if I can let somebody like have their food gradually through the day, like just spread out evenly, I'd rather just do that. And I kind of tell people too, like, don't be overly consumed with what you're eating before. Like, obviously you don't want to have like a bunch of fiber before you go train, or like a bunch of like protein before you go train, just because it's going to be harder to digest while you're training, and so you might feel like shit.
Bro, I'm like 300 or 400 grams of rice, 8 ounces of chicken, some coconut oil, like 30 minutes before I step into the gym. But no, Ryan reminded me a while back, I looked at like I was just curious on how long blood sugar stayed elevated post-meal, since that could be sort of an indicator, if something's still in the blood, that means it's not like being used actually for something yet, or has been used and absorbed into like a cell or something. And I want to say from memory, I know it was the participants were just fed like cream of rice. And so it was almost exclusively carb, just like a couple grams of protein, like trace fats. And I want to say blood sugar stayed elevated. And granted, they didn't train during this period, but I think it took like 3, 4, maybe even 5 hours for blood sugar to completely come back down to baseline. From like 50, 60 grams of carb from cream of rice.
That would make sense. Yeah. Am I getting any feedback right now? My headphones just decided to take it down. No?
No.
Sweet. All right. Expansion upon this question here. Another user submitted question. Friend of the channel, Corn Cob Jimmy is what they call her on the streets.
Never heard of her.
Jimmy asks, because it's similar to this question, at what point in training is it imperative that one include intra-workout carbohydrates? So at what volume of training would it be necessary where someone is going to see a clear and evident benefit from supplementing with some form of intra-workout carbohydrates?
I know the answer.
So,
if you're doing the Tour de France.
So, yeah, it's exercise durations, or it's exercise types that are rhythmic and continuous in nature. So think long distance running, long distance rowing, long distance cycling. Maybe it's, someone who is doing some aerobic work and they are a speed skater, like our good friend, Mr. Holt here, doing some long distance speed skating, more skating than speed, of like 90 plus minutes, maybe upwards of like 2 hours, where you can get, especially if you've had like a really big carbohydrate meal before you go. So when you had like 4 bagels for breakfast and now you're going to put in you're an insane endurance athlete and you're doing like 8 to 10 miles of running that day. Like maybe, after around the 3 mile mark, the 4 mile mark, you reach for some of those weird like goo, jelly, gummy, weird things that runners and whatnot eat. For a hypertrophy athlete, or for someone who is in the pursuit of strength and or hypertrophy, the need for intra-workout nutrition is essentially zero. It is about as close to zero as you can get.
I remember.
Go ahead.
I remember. I think somewhere in the master's program, I'm sure Ryan can attest this. Like we got into that para-workout lecture with Hoffman. And some bro in that class asked about how it applied to bodybuilders, and he just looked over at him like he had just insulted his mother or something like that. He was just like, it doesn't at all. And I thought like his face got red. I thought he was going to snap the kid's neck. But I mean, it just goes to that idea. Like how much glycogen are we actually depleting when you're doing curls? Like probably not very much. And then you have to right back to that evolutionary biologist hat again. How absurd would that be if we needed to make sure that we had enough glycogen or carbohydrate to do those curls, and once we use it, it was gone and we can't move our arms anymore? Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I actually think there's some research showing that like with something typical of a workout, like between 4 to 6 sets for a muscle, you deplete a good bit, but it's not like 100%. Like it's probably a good bit, 40, 60, 70 or something, but like that's not, like you said, evolutionarily, it's not like you just you're not able to use your arm anymore. But what I was going to say is, like, it's not that they're not helpful at all, but probably not to the magnitude that people think they are. And they probably don't need the like amount of shit in their drink as well. Like I can think of circumstances where like an intra-workout drink might be beneficial because like, think about like Gatorade formulation and stuff. Like the carbs are in there, like one for energy substrate for certain athletes, but also it improves like hydration as well. And, there's along with that, the electrolytes in that as well. So like, you training in a CrossFit, most of your workouts are pretty short, but like, let's just say you did an hour and a half, bodybuilding style workout in an environment like that. Like it might be beneficial to have an intra workout drink. It just probably doesn't need to be 50 grams of carbs and like, have a bunch of other random supplements in it.
So for context, I have yet to use any intra-workout carbohydrates since switching over. And I'll have workouts that are, similar to bodybuilding workouts. Like I can think of one that I'm going to have, I think it's tomorrow, where it's a workout. It's like 8 sets of 8 on bench press, 8 sets of 10 on pull-ups, and then it's 50 dips, 100 curls, 100 lateral raises, and then it's a short conditioning piece that probably has somewhere between 200 to 300 repetitions in it, of mostly like muscular endurance work. And then we've got 4 close to maximal 2,000 meter intervals on the rower. And like after that, I'll be drained, like I'll be dead, but I won't have any of those like hypoglycemia symptoms during my training session. And that's with, a moderate carbohydrate intake. Like I'm not slamming 600, 700 grams of carbs a day. I average, somewhere between like 300 and 350 grams of carbs a day to fuel workouts like that.
And it's interesting too that you say that, because like a healthy person really shouldn't like that's kind of the job of your liver, and like why you release like glucagon and less insulin like while you're training is so that it can make some blood glucose for you from other substrate that you're breaking down in your training.
Yeah. All right. We got to get on to the next question because it's going to take us a little while to just let Dom go on this one. Dom's going to preface us with a chapter called Ask Me a Good Question, Please. All right. So the next question comes from @tungsten.fitness. What is tungsten? That's like a metal on the periodic table, isn't it?
Metal.
It is.
They make wedding rings in it. You should get one.
Wow.
I've got one.
Guys,
tungsten.
look at that.
Tungsten.
I think it's because if like my finger gets broken, they can cut this off. I think is what it looks.
Damn.
I might have
that's
just
dark.
made that up.
That's
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah, because if you're wearing I forgot what it is. It's like if you're wearing maybe silver or something like that and it gets swollen, they might have to cut your finger off. But with tungsten, they can just cut through it. I think. I don't know. I may have just completely made that up.
That's
Somebody
what they want you to think.
Exactly.
So Tungsten Fitness asks, RIR or failure? End of the question right there. Dom, take us
Paul's
away.
the training guy.
Dom's the frustrated guy. Dom,
For
why are you
this
so frustrated?
guy, failure, because this is an absolute failure of a question, and this guy is a failure.
Oof, got it.
I don't know you. You can go ahead, Tom.
Well, so I'm going to assume he's asking, should I train to failure every session or should I implement some kind of RIR?
I think
Right.
that's what he means. Yes.
I
Let's
think
give
that's
him the
what
most
he means.
generous interpretation of his question. He probably means across all sessions, should I use an RIR approach or should I just blast myself to failure every single day?
Yeah. I would say you're not like Dorian Yates, so you should probably do some kind of RIR. I had this conversation with somebody the other day because he was like, why don't you train to failure every session? And I said, because you can't. Like, I can't do that. And he said, well, guys like Dorian did, guys like Branch Warren do. I said, but you're forgetting that Dorian did legs on Monday. He didn't do legs again until like Tuesday the next week. He didn't train that body part for like 8 days. Like, if he did one set to absolute failure and then did it again 8 days later, yeah, maybe he actually was trained to failure every time. But guys want to like train like that. And I think the issue with like the failure training every time is it makes it hard to track like progression. And I think with constantly going to failure, you have like guys where they're like 135 bench press, they do to failure. Then like the next time they train, they do it again. But they might have like so much fatigue accumulated that like their range of motion is different between both. So maybe they're affecting like the technique of training just because their accumulation of fatigue throughout the week is getting so high. I probably trained most of the time like a 2 RIR before working with Paul. I never trained like pure failure, like to where I fell on things and stuff. I always kept a little bit in the tank. It was just how I found myself growing the most. But then now, like working with Paul, and then Paul's like giving me all this information to read and things, like it just makes so much more sense why training, you don't have to call it RIR, but like training to some like cap each time and then slowly getting closer to that max. It just makes a lot more sense from so many different aspects, because I didn't realize like at first, like how many different aspects went into muscle building, like mind to muscle, metabolite accumulation, like all these different things that if you're going to failure each time, quote unquote, because it's not something you could do every session, because like we know some muscle groups don't repair as fast than others. So you could, do failure, like a push day, all to failure, come in the next day and do a back day, all to failure. When you go to do legs, your back might be the limiting factor because you trained it so hard that your leg workout suffered from it all. And I think that's where like RIR comes really in handy, that you can train these body parts one after another and not be completely gassed session after session after session.
Something I want to add before, Paul, I'm going to let you go here, but people seem to have an idea that training to failure is a purely physiological thing. They think that training to failure is nervous system, skeletal muscle, that is it. But there are other factors that go into training to failure that are outside of physiology. There's the psychological aspect of it, of who were you training with that day? Were you training alone, or were you training with your buddies that you really enjoy training with? What was the environment that you were training in? Was it in an environment like a gym where like everyone was going hard and you were very motivated to kind of go that same amount? How was your nutrition that day? How are your stress levels for that day? And all of these factors go into auto regulations of what failure is for that day. Because when all the conditions line up perfectly, a failure set is 405 on squat for 15 blood-curdling reps. When everything is going bad, stressful day at work, shit nutrition, psychologically in the dumps, got a bad night of sleep, failure is 405 for 7 life-sucking, soul-wrenching reps. It's like the failure point and the stimulus that was received by that muscle in those two conditions are probably close to the same, but the outcome of what you're measuring as quote unquote progress is very, very different. So from a logistical standpoint, using something like RIR, leaving something in the tank, leaving runway to keep going along that runway makes more sense from a planning standpoint. It may not be the best training to grow within that single moment, but growth occurs over months, years, and decades, not within a single training session.
I want to throw something out on what you just said, though. Potentially, they may not be the same because, like, part of the reason why maybe instead of getting, I think you said 15 reps and you just got like 7, or let's just say it was 10, it was something closer, is that nervous fatigue and not being able to activate those highest threshold or some of those motor units. So, like, if you're not activating some of those motor units, they're not really getting the same tension stimulus that they would have if you got 15 reps, you know? So, you can go on.
And I think the issue with that is, like, people will just say, oh, it was a bad training day. And then there's no measure of any progression there. Like, you logged a 405 for 15 on Monday, and then you logged a 405 for 6 on Thursday or Friday, but you just claimed it as a bad training day.
You can even think of it as like your body's forcing you to have reps in reserve because your body's like, hey, this muscle needs to recover. We're not using it to its full capacity. I won't let you.
So I was part of a study at UCF. I was a subject in it where the protocol, it was a muscle damage study. So they were just trying to induce as much muscle damage as possible and then measure creatine kinase, all the markers of muscle damage. And I witnessed firsthand how my body can auto-regulate effort to protect me. So the protocol was 5 sets of 10 on squat, bench, deadlift, and split squat for the day at 75%. So do some math there, 10 reps, 75%. Oh, good. Every set is a 10 RM. Perfect. By the time and the rests were 60 seconds between sets, so no complete recovery either. By the time I got to split squats, I would, and I'm not joking here, I would bend my knee and my entire leg would give out. So my body was RIRing hard at that point. It was like, please stop. You have just absolutely murdered yourself. You simply cannot do anymore. Like, that's just, it's not a productive way to progress your training over time. From a coaching standpoint, it's like, what the hell do I, like Dom said, what the hell do I do with this? I see my client log 405 for 15 on Monday, came back in on Friday, got 405 for 7. What do I do with this? What does this data even mean to me? And then from an athletic standpoint, you're like, okay, cool. I was a badass on Monday and now I'm a piece of shit on Friday.
Yeah. I think too, like, yeah, I mean, just to kind of put that into theoretical perspective, RIR is just a way to manage fatigue over time, right? So that preferably after 4, 5, 8 weeks of training, we were able to have more productive sessions over that time period. And then potentially, if we're recovering better or faster between sessions, potentially we can maybe even have more frequent sessions. And we know volume is an important aspect in that we do more volume over time, but also with like thinking about within the workout as well. Like we just talked about how that CNS fatigue, like some fatigue can linger from workout to workout and make, you get less reps on your next workout potentially. But also within that session, if you hit sets to failure early in your session and you have more sets for that muscle group, the following volume could be less effective and you could end up potentially accumulating less volume over the training session as well as between session or over sessions. And, I mean, we even know, like, for instance, and it's not even just for that muscle group. Like, we know if you do a really hard set of squats to failure, right? And most people aren't doing biceps in their leg workout, and then you do like a set of biceps, you may have a reduced output because of that systemic fatigue. So, I mean, but it may be common to do bench and biceps, bench and arms together, or bench and delts or something, or chest and delts or whatever. So that's a consideration. And then people make a lot of assumptions on the amount of stimulus that you may or may not be missing out on from doing a set to failure. So, but think about it this way, in terms of just practically, in terms of a stimulus, what's the difference between having 1 rep left and 0? The stimulus is probably incredibly similar. The difference, I mean, this is hypothetical. I can't say this for sure, but the difference between 1 IR and 0 RIR or failure in terms of stimulus is probably negligible. Almost identical. You're working really hard on both of those reps. And then with, as you get further from failure, maybe there is less stimulus, but it's probably not as much as you would think, 2 RIR to 1 RIR. You're still working really hard at 2 RIR. But what is pretty evident that we have all experienced, even just anecdotally, the amount of fatigue you get between 2 RIR, 1 RIR, and 0 RIR is huge.
Yeah.
Right?
and I think
fatigue
that,
and technique degradation.
And I think that goes into the volume thing you said. You can get more volume out of training like that. So which in turn ends up, spreading out, extending your exposure to stimulus rather than training to failure all the time.
And I'll throw out one more thing too, we may come to find with more and more research, because it is being explored more often, that the hypertrophy outcome could be very similar. And some of the research, there are limitations, some of the research is failure versus non-failure, and they literally 1 RIR versus 0 RIR, and it's that's so close together. It's it's the same stimulus. Of course they got very similar gains. But we may find that, even at 3 RIR or 2 RIR, we may find RIR is not better for gains. But if you make the same gains and you don't have to work as hard, isn't that better? If you don't have to risk injury more frequently, isn't that better? If you don't have to take 4 scoops of pre-workout and think about somebody murdering your family before a set, isn't that better?
Yeah, I guess it's in the interpretation. And like you said, there's a lot of limitations in the research. One of the limitations is us reading the study. We're not there watching the people train. So there's no way for us to say, okay, that was failure. I watched, subject number 7 do that set of leg extensions. That was failure.
Yeah, I think because, years back we were using RPE. or like sort of an adapted form of RPE for bodybuilders. So basically we already knew that it was, it's your perceived exertion, where RIR is still perceived. So I don't know if what you think is failure in your head is actually failure. I mean, I've never seen anyone squat to failure. That's just not something I've never, maybe on a 1 rep max attempt, I've seen someone fail, but I've never seen somebody do like a set of 8 to 12 and then fail on 11. That's just not something I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen people get pinned maybe on a leg press or something, but I've never seen somebody like really fail on bicep curls. It's just not. So we get a little bit tied up in the weeds here, I think, when people make that argument of like, is it failure or RIR? Well, it's definitely somewhere in the middle. It's real big in the natural community right now, where people go against RIR almost like militantly. And it's real big sort of like with the Brits. I mean, granted, they're jacked, but a lot of those guys are like, no, we go to failure every single time, no matter what. And then I look at some of their sets and I'm like, is that real? Was that really failure? Like, it looks like the speed of that's what we would consider to be like 2 reps left, because the bar was still moving pretty fast. Just because you slam the barbell down after your last rep of deadlifts and then grunted does not mean that that's failure. So, I mean, I think we get a little bit caught up in the weeds here, because RIR is still relative, and then failure is probably also somewhat relative.
Yeah, the chart Paul has for like bar speed or like movement speed, that really showed me a lot. Like what speed your lift should actually look like at what RIR. Like you could really tell, like if a client sends me a video, they're on like a 2 RIR week, and I can just tell by the way they're moving, I know they're like really undershooting or overshooting just from their video.
I mean, I do it with myself. I watch a video of me lifting and I'm like, oh, that was definitely like a 4. And I said, in my head, it felt like a 2. Because I'm like, it's barely moving. I'm going to die. And I look at it and I'm like, oh no, because you're in that moment and you're moving weight. Things just feel differently. So I mean, it gets real tough. But at the end of the day, RIR is just a way to gauge, or a way for you to make sure that you're training hard every single time. So if you look at the logbook and you did 10 and that was a 3, well, hopefully now maybe a little bit more weight, you can also get 10 and now that's a 2. You've overloaded at the end.
Or you get lucky and you didn't accumulate a ton of fatigue from that last workout. You added load and it's still a 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Where if you went to failure, potentially, I mean, it still could have been a good workout. At some point you probably would have broken down and had a bad workout, but like, or, what the fuck was I saying? Wait, what did I say just before that?
No one was listening, Paul.
Damn it. I had a thought literally just.
Here, Paul, let me fill in the gap here, and we'll give you a chance to think about it. I got 2 takeaways from what Jason said, and they're both very good takeaways. The first takeaway is that intensity, whether it be relative or absolute, is more about guttural noises and faces that you make in the mirror than it is about actual training intensity, the classical definition. So we can go ahead and rewrite the record books, the textbooks there. And the second thing I got away, because Jason was talking about, a true set of failure to squat. A true set of failure is I squatted down, I tried to stand up, my leg musculature did not have the gusto to get me back up, and the weight fell off of my back. What I can tell you is that the people who are saying they're doing 4 sets of squat to failure are liars, because no one fails on a set of squat and then comes back for more. No one like outside of federal prison. Because if you come back after that set of failure and you do 3 more sets, we need to talk about #mental health, because you got some screws that are very loose, sir or madam. Paul, did you think of what you were going to say?
I can't, but I really do like Jason's point, and you phrase it a little differently, but it's, RIR is actually, like, people look at it as a way to kind of, people who view it negatively, almost like an excuse to be lazy, but it's actually more so a way to ensure you're working hard enough, right? Like, we're working there's some threshold, like it's not just an on or off switch. Like growing isn't an on or off switch where it's like, okay, like we hit failure, so we're definitely growing. We're 2 reps shy away from failure. We didn't do enough to get any sort of adaptation, you know? So like, but there is like some threshold where we're probably like optimizing our, like getting that stimulative response. And so you're just ensuring that, hey, we're working hard enough to hit this. And at some point we probably will hit failure. And like, whether it's planned or unplanned, like it's not a fear of failure.
Let's say.
I think the evidence-based community kind of dumped on beating the logbook. Like, beating the logbook was like this hardcore mentality of like, what the hell are those guys doing? Like, writing down in their logbook the reps that they're doing and just, hashtag beating the logbook each week.
But
like, how
that's
stupid
what
that.
I feel like that's what you should do with RIR.
We circled all the way back around and we're like, hold on, wait. Descending RIRs is beating the logbook. We are who we swore to defeat.
Like, if you're good at this, anybody who I've met some weird genetic freaks that are at least claim, like, I don't track anything, I just go in and train. But, like, the vast majority of the people I know that are good at this and that have made progress, like, that's what they do. Whether I use RIR, and if I happen to hit my RIR a little early, I cut the set for the day because it's a clear indicator that maybe I'm not recovered well and I need some recovery time or something. But like, before I start a set, before I touch the weight, I'm like, okay, I got 12 reps last week at 3 RIR. I'm adding 2.5 pounds to each side. I'm getting 13 this week, and I'm taking at least 13, maybe more, and I'm taking the set to 2 RIR. You know what I mean?
So I'm going to close this out with a story of a genetic freak who ain't never heard of RIR and ain't never needed it. Jay, I think you know this guy. His name's like Lee, I think. He used to work out at the Oviedo LA Fitness.
Yeah,
he has
I got a story about that guy.
Big man tattooed on his forearms, and let me tell you, he was a big man. This guy used to come in the gym, jeans and a tank top, the fit, and he would go immediately to the dumbbell rack, grab the 125s for incline, no warm-up. This is off the streets. The man comes in warmed up and full of rage, and just alternating press. I'm talking like sets of 20 with the 125s, no warm-up. Straight over to the bar to do some deadlifts. 135, nah. 225, not a fucking chance. 315, save that shit for the birds. We're going straight to 405 for first set, and you goddamn better believe that I'm screaming on every rep. Lee, if you're out there watching, I think your name was Lee. I fucking love you, man. When I was like 21, you were legit my hero. I wanted to be you.
Dude, that guy, when I sort of made the transition from competing in the NPC and men's physique to natural bodybuilding, I remember it was my first show. Katie and I, it was our first show. So we show up and I walk in and I think I'm hot shit because I've done well in an NPC men's physique show. I'm going to fucking clean house here. So I show up and there's a fella sitting on the floor as we're checking in and he's hoodied up. He's got a hoodie on. He's got some beat up sneakers. And he looks up at me and he was like, and the voice that came out sounded like what I imagined if God and James Earl Jones had a baby. This is what the voice would sound like. And he lifts up his hoodie and he just asked me, he's like, you competing today? And I was just like, what the yeah, I'm going to compete. Yeah. Okay. So I don't really pay much attention to him because he stayed hoodied up the entire time. So we're all warming up. I'm getting warm. Still thinking I'm going to crush this whole thing. And then this guy disrobes and I look over and I'm just like, immediately I'm like, oh, this is fucked. I'm like, Katie, let's pack all our shit. Let's go home. It's over. The most ridiculous human being I've ever seen. And then I start talking to him and he's like, I'm like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I think he was doing road construction. I'm like, yeah, of course that's what you do. I'm like that. Yeah. It totally makes sense. The most ridiculous human being I've ever seen in person.
Before we close it out though, or move on or whatever, do you guys are familiar with the Dorian Yates training, right? You guys watch Blood and Guts and all that?
Yeah.
It's been some years for me, but like every day. It's been some years for me, but it wasn't just, he didn't just do one all out set to failure, right? Like he had a couple sets. First one was somewhat easier.
Yeah.
The second one was challenging, but just not to failure. And then he would do one or two more that were to failure.
Yeah, it was,
Right?
like
So
it was an easy one that looked probably close to like a 4 or a 5 RIR, and then he would have like a moderate set that was maybe like 2 or 3 RIR, and then he would I think it was just one final set. So that final set was just the one where he would go 0 or 1 RIR to failure. So it was kind of like a pyramiding RIR set, not a lot of volume at that super, super high intensity.
yeah, but ultimately, like, what people don't realize probably is, like, some of those earlier sets ramping up, like, those counted towards
Absolutely
volume for adaptation. And his workouts were not as low volume as people like to probably make it sound. Like, it probably was on the lower end of volume, but it wasn't like just like people make it sound like it was just as low volume as you get. Like he only did for challenging sets when like the other sets were hard enough to count towards like probably some stimulus for adaptation. And like, you know, all around, like, isn't all that unintelligent of an approach? Like if somebody did tell me they wanted to go to failure every single workout, I would say, well, like, let's at least be strategic about it and just take your last set to failure, or just take your last set of that muscle group to failure, maybe, so that you can still, you know, maybe not limit your volume a little bit and get a little more effective volume in there. But even we know him though, I mean, he suffered his fair share amount of injuries. And not only that, like, you know, you would be silly to think he wasn't using large amounts of drugs that sort of change, you know, not change what's effective, but I mean, you know, when you have 1, 2, 3 plus grams of gear in your body, like, and like, yeah, training maybe once a week is cool because you have that elevated muscle protein synthesis response all the time for covering those long durations of time, you know?
So yeah, he was doing, you know what, 4 to 5 exercises per muscle group, doing those once a week with one relatively easy set, one moderate set, and one failure set. So he had 5 sets to failure per week. That was it.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at like what we consider to be the most amount of, or you know, that range of effective volume for the population, it's an average. So he's probably just on the outside of the average. So it's not really like he's doing anything that's crazy. It's just that is what worked for him, and a boatload of drugs. So
yeah, and when you really fuck yourself up is when you combine the high volume approaches of other bodybuilders in that era or the era before, the Arnolds of the world that were doing, you know, 3-4 hours of training a day. You combine that high volume with the high intensity when you really start running into some issues. I think there was a lot of stuff about Dorian taking like illegal prescription level painkillers before each workout as well, because he was nursing
a lot of those days. Back
there was an injectable pain reliever that all those guys used.
So like Nubane was one that was addictive, I believe, and then even what was it, Toradol?
Toradol. Yep.
Toradol is a common one.
That's the one he talks about. I think he talked about that on the
kidneys, maybe. I don't know.
On the episode with Mr. Mr. Joe Rogan. I think he talked about that a bit.
Yeah, he talked about his gear use too. It wasn't too high, apparently.
Yeah, right. And like,
allegedly.
You know, like people think that that's just the cost of the sport, but really in bodybuilding, like minor stuff like tendonitis, sure, you know, little overuse injuries. You know, I got like a little bullshit going on with my shoulder that I should probably figure out within a week or two. But like serious injuries, you know, like that should not happen in bodybuilding. We have like so many options for movement selection. Like there's just like everything when it comes to everything recovery wise, like you shouldn't be like, you should not finish a career bodybuilding and be like, yeah, I tore my lat once and my bicep once and my chest once. Like, I need hip and knee fucking surgery. Like, those are injuries you should get from playing like high level professional sports.
Yes.
With a performance component.
Yeah.
Where like you have to perform and you have to perform under injury because you make money or like a college scholarship is on the line or some bullshit.
So don't tear my lat to impress someone at the local LA Fitness.
No, don't do it. Highly unrecommended.
Not worth it. All right, guys, that is going to wrap us up today. I know we spent a good amount of time on those first couple questions. So if you did ask a question, it is on the list. It will get answered in an episode to follow. As always, do the like, comment, subscribe, that kind of stuff, blah, 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 blah. If you made it this far, we love you. Paul loves you. He's going to come to your house late at night and tuck you in, give you a little smoochie on your forehead. We'll see you on the next one. As always, stay gifted, guys. See ya.
Bye.
Peace up, A-Town down.